This week we are going to finish our owl pictures. Now, if you didn't do it last week, you can go back and look at Little Owl Part 1, where we talked about how we drew our little owl pictures. And now this week we're going to paint it in, because sometimes art takes more than just the 50 minutes that we have for it. And so we just like to take our time and do it 2 times, 2 different weeks. All right. So I love your little owl pictures, and today I'm going to show you how I would like you to paint them. Now, if you don't have paint, just watch this so you learn a little bit about how to use watercolor and how to do it correctly. And then you can always go back and think of an alternative way to color it in. If you have crayons, you could just color in a little bit lighter than the lines that you made before so that they still show up, or maybe colored pencils into that area. But again, just watch me this week so you can at least learn how to do this. And I'm not requiring you to ever buy paints, but if you have them, this is a great way to use them. All right, I'm going to go ahead and tilt it back down, and I'm going to show you what I have. So whenever I paint, I like to put down something like a paper towel to protect the table, and then I also sometimes use it if I need to test the colors off to the side. So I like to do that. So I have a piece of paper towel right here. I'm going to set my painting on it. I have a cup of water, and then I have my watercolor set. We're not going to use all the colors today, but that's all the colors that came in my nice set. And then I have my brush also. Now, these watercolors haven't been used today, and so if that's true for you, then you will need to get them probably a little bit more wet in the beginning. Now, they're called watercolors, but these are solid watercolors. You can buy watercolors that are already liquid in a bottle, and you don't have to add water to them. But these are water-based, and remember, the wax from our crayons, wax and water resist each other, so it's going to kind of help us keep it inside. And then where we did our stars last week, those will pop up when we use it. So I'm going to start by, on my paints, is putting my paintbrush in my water and swirling it around. Now, always remember, we don't want to tap it, because for several reasons. One, it could splatter all over the place. Another reason also is it could make this spill quite easily. So whenever you paint, you just swirl it around, swish it around, and you gently wipe it on the side. And then you add a little bit of water to your paints. So I'm going to go ahead, and I want to start with my owl. And I actually decided not to do the owl brown. I'm going to save the brown for the tree. And I was looking at the book that we talked about last week, and this owl looks a little bit more orange. So I'm going to do mine orange. Again, it's up to you. You're the artist. So I'm going to get my orange wet. Like, these are pretty dry right now, so I'm going to get a little bit, probably more wet than I need to. You never want it dripping though. And the thing about watercolors that's really nice is if it comes off too dark on your paper, you can just go straight to the water and spread it out a little bit more. Or if you want to add a little bit more paint, you just know you need less water. So I'm going to go ahead and start painting my owl. Take your time. Now I'm going to probably fast forward through this a little bit or show you in stages, because I don't want you to spend your whole lesson watching me paint. So you get an idea of what I'm doing. So I'm going to go ahead and paint Little Owl's head. And tree. And then I'm going to come back to it after I'm done with that, show you what I did, and then I'm going to show you how I'm going to do the sky. Something I did want to remind you about when you paint is that you always want to be gentle, and you never want the metal or the hard part of your brush to touch the paper. You also want to try to go gently in sort of one direction instead of scrubbing, is what I call it, because it just looks a little messy and it's really rough on your brush. And your brush can actually last a really long time if you take your time. You always want to aim for what I like to say is a good hair day for your brush. You want to keep it nice and formed into a point instead of messy and frizzy all over. It'll just keep your paintings nice and neat. I think painting is very relaxing. I enjoy it. It's probably one of my favorite things to do in art. It doesn't have to be messy. And if you ever add too much paint to your paper and it's just too much, all you have to do is take a little piece of paper towel and kind of pull it off, or a dry paintbrush. I can show you in a minute because I see a spot that I have way too much paint in. Right there, I've got a lot of paint going on, so let me see. So I'm going to pull off a little piece of dry paper towel. And you can also add a little texture by doing this as well. You can push on it a little bit and it pulls it right off. It leaves a little texture if you want to use that, or I'm just going to go over it gently with a little bit of less water so it didn't pool up and be too dark there. So that's up to you, but that's a quick little trick to pull some paint off if it's dry. Okay. Remember too, I am doing this backwards so that you can see it. It would be easier to probably go like this. But when you're painting, you can definitely turn your paper and adjust it for what works for you. This part is easier for me to have this closer to me. Also be aware of what you're wearing. Just be really careful, and if you have long sleeves, it's not a bad idea to push them up so you don't get your sleeve in your painting. Now, watercolors dry pretty fast, and that's something I also want to mention. You don't want your paper too wet because you don't want it to get soggy and get a hole to go through your paper. If your paper's thin, it can happen pretty easily. So if you see a lot of moisture and water on your paper, don't keep painting over it. It needs to dry a little bit, or the paper is just going to get kind of fuzzy on the top and you might get a hole. So less is more. You don't want to add too much, even though painting's fun. I'm doing the wings orange, but I'm going to try to make them a little lighter. I want them to stand out. And now that I'm doing that, I'm thinking I might actually put a little yellow in there. And I'm going to show you, if you ever want to mix some colors, a trick. So I want them to look a little different. That one's kind of a lot the same. So I'm going to clean my brush off by swirling it, wiping it on the side, and I'm going to use my paper towel to gently in one direction clean it off a little bit. And I'm going to add a little bit of yellow. It's going to give it kind of an yellow-orange appearance, which I like because it looks a little different. Yeah. Okay. Now I'm going to paint my tree brown. And if ever your water gets too dirty looking or dark, you can go change it by gently dumping it out and just getting fresh water. Now, this is where you're really going to see on the tree where the crayon resists. So you can see it popping up. So in areas where you might make it a lighter brown, but you already used a brown crayon, you can see the paint will not stick to that wax where the crayon was. And that's called resist. Also, I like that when I have the paper towel on the edge, it allows me to go off the edge of the paper a little bit without getting the table messy. See, I've got a lot of brown right there and I don't want that. So I'm going to tear off a little paper towel, stick it on there and pull some of that up because I don't want it to drip all over. And actually, I like how the texture looks. Okay, so on the cover of this storybook, I noticed that around the second ring around the eyes are green, and I think that looks so cool. So I'm going to do that on my owl. So again, I'm switching colors. So I'm swirling it and wiping on the side, and I'm going to try to pull any extra paint off like that. Okay, so I'm going to go to green. I'm saving the black paint for the sky for last for a couple reasons. It's the biggest area, but also because I know it's going to make my water very dark and murky, and so it just saves me time. Sometimes if you do your lighter colors first, it just works out better that you don't have to switch the water as fast. And remember, watercolor dries fast. I know I've said that before, but it's a good thing just to remind yourself because if it starts to get a little lighter, it's probably because it's drying also, and you don't need to keep going over and over the top of it unless it's really bothering you and you don't like how light it is. So I've got my green rings around the eyes, and I'm going to add a little bit of green to my little feathers over here that I made. Okay, finally, I'm going to go ahead and do my sky. I've decided to leave the moon just plain white because I want it to be white like a full moon, and I added a couple little light black rings in there, and it's really going to show up, I think, when I go ahead and paint my sky. So I'm going to reposition this. I've got a little edge here. Wipe it on the side, and I'm going to go for the color black. Now, this is where, anywhere where you used a white crayon, see, it's going to pop right out. See, it resisted it. So there it is. Looks like it's hiding, but then you'll make it pop right out. I finished owl. I can't wait to see what yours looks like.